Fingers crossed. All right. We are live according to this thing. So, we have to do the ubiquitous marketable intro. So here we go. Live stream talking about cyber stuff. Chase Cunningham, Rick Holland, one of the smartest guys in the business, smarter than Jeff Pollard if he's listening by far.
That's such a low bar.
So the idea here is to live stream and have some no BS, like honest conversation and talk about the stuff that's gone on over the course of the last week. And I know that I haven't been on Fox News or MSNBC or CNN or any of those other things. How about you?
Not recently.
Not recently. Well, you're big time, so I haven't been on at all. I don't think I'm going to get a call anytime soon. So you actually pinged me and said, I think that there's some things we should discuss about this whole, thing going on with the ransomware and the White House and whatnot. What is your perspective on this, and where are we at with it?
Oh, it was such a nice, it's such a nice letter. Well, I guess level setting, right? What was it? Yesterday afternoon, Ann Nuremberg had put out a open letter to corporate executives and leaders about the ransomware threat, talking about, their the private sector's role, and not just role, but responsibility, right? It had responsibility in there in trying to deal with the ransomware threat. And there's all kinds of stuff in there. I don't know where the best place to start on is, but it was like, there's some things that you can do, but most of the things you could do there are not, it's a long tail, right? It's not like I'm going to be able to solve this problem tomorrow. So yeah, it kind of got me going a little bit, because I'm like, oh man, here's the government giving some guidance, which I think is good guidance, but we got to keep it real on how long it took us 20, 30 years to get where we're at. We're not going to solve it, based on one announcement from the White House.
Well, it's funny to me, because when I look at that announcement and you run through it, I mean, the kind of stuff you see is somebody that's in the industry, you go, well, duh. This is stuff that everybody's been screaming about saying for the last X number of years, segmentation, multi-factor auth, all those kind of things that we would say are quote unquote best practices. For me, I'm immediately sitting there going like, well, if they're just regurgitating what we already know as best practices, then why is this not more known by people? Is it really as bad as folks just don't get this, and all of a sudden we woke up to cybersecurity? I just can't wrap my head around that.
I just think these things cost money, and companies use their assets, their cash in other ways, right? To grow revenue, enter new markets, get new products, all that sort of stuff. Because imagine that list of things they had on there. There's a lot of money to invest in to roll that out.
Yeah, but a lot of the stuff that we kind of see in a whole bunch of places that's best practices, whatever. I mean, there are ways to do it without it being exceedingly expensive, especially for small and mid-sized enterprises. I mean, that's one of the things that kind of throws me off a bit is it shouldn't cost you 7 figures to set up a decent security infrastructure if you're a small or mid-sized enterprise. Yeah, I mean, if you're a mega business, okay, lots of moving parts, lots of different things, but that's not everybody, right? I mean, isn't that a fair statement?
No, I think you're right. Especially, I think maybe on the small side, maybe it's the skill set. It's maybe the people where MSSPs could come in that are focused on that segment of the market. Could be helpful there. But I think the people component is not just the money. It's do you have the resources to implement this sort of stuff, and the time to do it. Yeah, there's stuff that you can roll out on the cheap, but if people are trying to on the zero trust, as I'm talking here to Dr. Zero Trust here, right? Some of the zero trust stuff, and you were on our podcast last month, and we talked a little bit about this, like changing the engine of the airplane while it's in flight. Some of that stuff is tough.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think it pushes more towards this move towards cloud and hosting and MSSPs and those types of things. We've jumped the shark, in my opinion, on a lot of us trying to do this ourselves. Why should we? I mean, I have a Dodge truck outside. I don't have to be an ASE certified mechanic to drive my truck to the gym or the store or somebody. I go to people that are pros that do that for me. I don't even have to know how the damn thing works. All I got to do is get it and push the button and go. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. If you look at, G Suite and the stuff from Azure and whatever, like you can, I would say unequivocally, in my experience, at least I think you could set up from scratch in one of those cloud service providers and do the majority of the things you need. Now, there's always ways to make it better and more whiz bang, but for the basics, like that's kind of available, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what we have is like you're encumbered by the past and the past infrastructure and things like that. Like if you were starting a brand new company, like all the cloud natives out there, right? If you're cloud native, you have a different set of problems in the cloud and things along those lines. But some of these issues in cloud native and a scalable, homogeneous environment, I think there's some real benefits of not having that, technical debt and the encumbrance of all these infrastructure and tools and stacks that we've had over decades now.
Yeah, and I seem to run into this issue a lot of times too, where something comes out from the government and everybody goes, "Oh, the government says this is it," and all of a sudden, scramble, shuffle, and no progress really happens because guess what? Another thing comes out from the government that says do this, and it's scramble, shuffle. And honestly, I mean, you were Army, I was Navy. Like we know the game of if you're in some of those leadership positions, you can kind of wait for another administration to come along and it's going to be a different set of priorities.
Yeah. I think there's another angle to that too, because I'd have to talk to some of our former colleagues at Forrester for what they're saying the current tenure of a CISO is, or the current tenure of a CEO. But then the other angle that you have on that is public companies who so often, live quarter to quarter. I think that's why you see a lot of companies that'll go private, because then they can invest in things and do a lot of stuff as a private company they could never do as a publicly traded company. So it's almost like we're short-sighted in how we're trying to secure our environments, and we don't play the long game. Meanwhile, you've got a 5-year plan, from our friends in China as an example, and China is definitely playing the long game, but we're playing the short game.
Well, I mean, okay, so you said it, right? You're the threat intel guy over there at Digital Shadows, and I've already had people pinging me right and left going like, so what's up with the Russia, connection, the side of this whole equation? Is this I mean, personally, I think that this is leadership in that area, however you want to call it, flexing a bit. I'm not saying that they're sanctioning it or saying, yes, this go off and do these things. However, if I happen to know that some of these capabilities exist, and I also know that I've got a big meeting coming up and I'm trying to let people know, like, don't screw with me, maybe some stuff happens because I kind of turn a blind eye to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably state permitted and it's like, oh yeah, this is bonus. It can happen. And if it disrupts one of our adversaries and causes confusion, plus it's almost like a proof of concept of, hey, if we do want to get, the real teams going on this, look at all of this, sitting duck infrastructure that we have to go and target. Like whenever we have, you and I've talked about like cyber war in the past, whenever we have real cyber war, this past month doesn't make me get real excited about our ability to defend ourselves.
No, hell no. I keep buying ammo and keep digging my bunker a little deeper in the backyard. It's like people looking at you like the tinfoil hat side of things. It's like, well, no, because I mean, have you seen how this is going? And okay, so that's a good point too. Is there's been folks that have been on the news or whatever lately going like, oh, this ransomware like the ransomware stuff didn't just kick off that day. Like it took a while for people to map out, to figure where they were going to go, probably to get the exploits, to get in, to tunnel, to do all the other stuff you have to do. Some of this stuff has been going on probably for years, and we're just now seeing it because somebody decided to flick the switch.
Yeah. And they've got their tooling and their infrastructure ready to go. I think a lot of it is opportunistic though. In the targeting, like there's a lot of low hanging fruit. That's what worries me more about if things were to escalate when they got like straight up real targeting, from nation actors versus cyber criminals that are permitted to operate. I do have a joke about the ransomware actors a little bit. I think they do a better job of data discovery than the defenders do, because they'll get their initial access into the environment from RDP, from TeamViewer, through phishing, all the various techniques they use to get in. And then within weeks in the environment, they've done their data discovery. They know what's going on. They've taken your data to a staging site. Then they put it up on their blog, and now you found it out there, and now you're trying to see if that matches your stuff on the inside. Where were these guys when we were rolling out DLP 10 years ago? Like, they've got some talk about best practices. We could probably learn from some of their best practices.
Oh yeah, I mean, maybe we should figure out, that'd be the next $1 billion cyber startup, is to go hire a bunch of ransomware criminals and make them auditors. Like, you call it, I don't know, like coal-fired 2.0 or something, and you go hire a bunch of ransomware people that are probably rich anyway, and go, we need some really good auditors. You guys are the best at finding this stuff. Like, let's go.
Well, I mean, we definitely do see the criminals getting jobs, a decade later in the private sector. I don't know that I would personally want to hire someone that had a background necessarily like that, but it does happen.
I don't know. That's part of the thing too, that I have conversations with people, family and whatnot, that they're going like, this is criminal, and I kind of sit there going, yeah, it's criminal, and they're doing things they shouldn't. However, I mean, can you imagine maybe putting yourself in that place, in that mindset, and then in that economic scenario where there's really not a lot else you could do to have a financially sustainable lifestyle, and you have a skill set, and you can't get a job somewhere else.
A certain set of skills.
Yeah, right. The Liam Neeson thing. I have a certain set of skills. But so I mean, I don't know, because I've also been reading some articles too that have been talking about the cartels down in Mexico. I've figured out that cybercrime is possibly more profitable than drugs, and they're starting to show up there.
It's so scalable, right? No
matter what, like,
yeah.
You're not getting caught.
And as we're seeing right now, with the Russia permitted activity, as long as you don't target, Russian interest, you're going to be fine, unless they need to make a periodic scapegoat or something like that. Like, I am interested to see how much pressure the U.S. brings to bear. We've been putting sanctions on Russia forever. Like, I don't know, short of dropping bombs, how much more pressure are you going to actually put in? Probably not a lot.
And I mean, every time you push a sanction out, do you think that anybody over there actually freaks out? Like, oh, what are we not going to get? I don't know, Ted Nugent music and, Coors beer. Like, so what? Like, what else are you going to sanction them with? They don't care. Like, it's big deal. It's like when you were a kid and your mom made those empty threats, don't do that. And after the 50th time of her saying, don't do that, you just kind of did it anyway. Cause what was the fear? I can't see in my mind how somebody in the administration goes, we're going to sanction the crap out of you. And they go, oh, Jesus, like, this is bad. We should fix this. So what?
No, I don't know what additional pressure outside of kinetic you can apply. Although I'm not a foreign policy diplomat and stuff along those lines, but
they couldn't handle us as diplomats. I can tell you that. I mean, my favorite one that I really love, and it's one of those things of don't mess with the Israelis, is when the Hezbollah or Hamas, I can't remember who it was messing with the Israelis, and the cyber attacks went on there, and they just blew up the building that the guys were in. Like, it was like, it's one of those things of, you can sanction them, you can send them nasty grams, you can do the political stuff, whatever. Eventually, if you have that type of capability and you lob one down range, all of a sudden folks know you're not playing. Like, I understand in Russia, US, China, US, there's a whole other swath of whatever. But the point being, we don't have any options. Like, what are we going to do? I mean, what are we going to send in SEAL Team 6 into downtown Moscow to go pick these guys up out of a hotel?
Yeah, I saw some people on the socials getting excited about, oh yeah, we're going to bring to bear, just yesterday, y'all may have seen it, but the Department of Justice has now said that has escalated ransomware to the same level as terrorism. Although my comment on Twitter last night is like, we've been in the war on terrorists over 20 years now.
30 years?
Yeah. So I'm glad it's getting escalated, but that doesn't mean the problem's going to get solved. And then other folks are like, yeah, right, we're going to go kick doors down. Yeah, we're not going to have a international incident that could bring on World War III to go and get our evil crew. No. Now, if they leave the country, the country, right, and that's where you get the individual criminals, the extradite them when they go someplace on vacation. Or there's a famous one, I don't know if you know this one, Chase, but it was a seller from an old market, a dream market, a now defunct English language market, and the dude's name was Oxy Monster. So he was a drug seller. but he also had like this amazing beard and mustache. And he wanted to come to Austin, the state that you abandoned.
Abandoned. Wow, that's harsh.
But he wanted to come to Austin for the World Mustache and Beard Championships.
Oh, nice.
And so when he flew into the U.S. to go there, they arrested him. So,
how would you like to spend the rest of your life in Colorado because of a beard competition?
I don't think it was worth it. I think that dude was wanting a do-over. Like I like to see stories like that, but I think those kind of actions are a drop in the bucket as far as what's going on. Cybercrime finds a way. Someone else is going to fill that gap.
What was the stat the other day that if cybercrime were an economy, it would be the third largest economy behind the US and China? Like, that's like, whoa, like crazy. I mean, and this stuff is only going to get more. I mean, and that's the other piece too. And you and I have talked about this before, where once you've commoditized the methods to do this stuff and you can sell it as like a service, then it just goes, through the roof.
Well, those affiliate programs, talk about like an annuity for the crews that run the affiliate programs. They're just now, as we saw with DarkSide, right? You could take some risk if an affiliate, was the one that went into Colonial Pipeline, and then your brand takes the damage there. But yeah, I mean, that's just like just like we all want to have, and you and I are both on the vendor side, right? We have different sales channels. You have, direct, you have your reseller channels, you got MSSPs, you got SIs, all that sort of stuff. Criminals have those same types of models, and they want as many revenue streams as possible. It's so like parallels legitimate business.
I mean, yeah, because I mean they're better at this than a lot of businesses are as far as rolling and rocking and rolling and whatever else. So okay, so going further into that, because we're getting guidance and stuff from on high. I've been looking at a lot of the things around, like, if we actually said this is what's going to happen and we passed a law for cybersecurity in the United States, right? I personally think that is probably the longest shot over the bow that I could possibly imagine. But I mean, we don't even have the people in place to make that a thing. Do you agree, disagree? Like I've looked, and you know how many people we have with computer science degrees and all of leadership up there? Guess.
I don't know. I have no clue.
4, right? And of those 4, guess how many graduated in the last 2 decades?
Well, I think that's an interesting one is, but I think what you see is a lot of support staff that are advising, will be Agreed. Younger and things along those lines. But Chase, the letter yesterday, I'll just read this to you. It solved the problem. The federal government stands ready to help you implement these best practices.
Didn't Ronald Reagan say something about that? Like, I'm the government and I'm here to help.
How are you gonna? This is where, for me, is like, fund it. If you want to raise the bar, there's got to be, like, maybe you could set up some grants so people could roll out different types of technology. Where I really think one thing, I just made a joke about it, but one thing that I really did like in the announcement yesterday was talking about having empowered security teams. Like, to me, that's critical. Like, if there's one place you want to invest, it's in your resources and your people. And I really appreciated that Ann called that out there, because, forget all the stupid technology that we sell, you sell. Like, if you don't have the right people on your teams to make that stuff work, it's not going to work. So, I make a little bit of jokes about the announcement in some areas, but I really like them calling out the people. But somebody hungry there?
Oh, that's my doorbell. I have a wireless doorbell, right? Everybody talks about Ring, and so I have a Pomeranian. That's his job.
You don't strike me as a Pomeranian kind of guy, Chase.
The best thing about a Pomeranian is that he will take on a grizzly bear. He has no idea that he is too small to fight with anything. So that's my favorite thing about him. But yes, I have him, and then I have a giant Doberman and a German Shepherd. So I have to keep it balanced,
We had Pomeranians growing up, so I'm used to them. I don't know if anybody is a fan of the Blade vampire movies, but you might remember in Blade 3 that Triple H has a vampire Pomeranian. So when I saw that, I just lost my mind, because I think I was watching it, or watching a rerun of it, maybe with our Pomeranian in our lap when that came on, and we just all started laughing.
Yeah, it's not. They're not far off from actually maybe doing that if they ever became a vampire. Oh, okay. So a couple of other points here that I think are worth talking about that folks have been back and forth on social media, and you saw some of these bouncing around with the channels that we're on. But does it make sense in the context of this whole thing for everybody to just start jumping into cyber? Like, I think what I'm worried about is that there still doesn't seem to be a structure to this thing. It just is, like you said, the government's here, we're ready to help. Okay, great. But like when I look at the leadership stuff up there, I don't see who's running the show on cyber and who's actually commanding control of the shots. Like, I'm not saying we should bring Giuliani back because that's a whole other issue. But I'm just talking about there isn't a cyber leader of any particular note when you look at the administration across the whole. Like, Ann's great. I think she's amazing, but there doesn't seem to be a formalized structure that can actually help do this.
Yeah, I also think you're also just talking about the executive branch. Like, if we're trying to talk about like the recruiting and getting people in and stuff along those lines, I mean, like, Congress has a role. Like, I did an article for SE Magazine where I was like, Congress is going to have to pick up the ball here. That executive order from a month ago, 3 weeks ago, only can go so far, and it only is for certain agencies, and it's not beyond that. Like, I think if we really want to make a difference, there's got to be some kind of congressional action on it. And I would use like breach notification. That could be a helpful. Like, I would love for us to see breach notification. I think another thing that could be useful is, Sarbanes-Oxley did make a difference, right? We had the cooking of the books and Arthur Anderson, and Sarbanes-Oxley came out, and now CFOs and CEOs have to sign things. Like, I would like to see more, culpability and responsibility put onto the boards and the directors of companies, because all of the things that, what we urge you to do now, and again, they cost money, even if it's a small amount of money. If you're a small business, if you're going to roll out some of these controls, it's going to cost things, and those are getting deprioritized by a lot of organizations.
Yeah, I think that honestly that we should have a standard for negligence in this thing, just like you have for manufacturers of like airplanes and automobiles and whatever else. Because I can't remember the article, I'd have to go find it, but there was an article that talked about the warnings for supply chain, third party basics, the whole thing. And it was published in 2015. Now, last time I checked is 2021. So essentially 6 years worth of warnings. And this is not like other people haven't been shouting this from the rooftops, but there's a standard, I think, that is clearly definable in a lot of this stuff of you are woefully negligent in the way that you approach the problem, and you should be punished for it. And it's not, I'm going to punish you with a fine that you stroke a check for and walk away from. If you build an airplane that I don't know, the friggin' engine falls off at 30,000 feet and people die, like, you're going to go to prison. That's the type of thing that has to happen. And the only reason I think that hasn't happened yet is because we haven't had mass casualty event in the United States.
I think the mass casualty bit, because we all kind of joke about Leon Panetta and the cyber harbor, right? But at some time that joke's going to become a reality.
Funny,
I mean, and it'll be I think it does take like a 9/11 mass casualty type of event. Oh, I just created the 9/11 cyber. That's almost as bad as cyber Pearl Harbor. But yeah, I think you're right. Like there's going to have to be like some pretty significant kinetic impact, or I think I was messaging you or when we lost our energy here in Texas for just about a week. Like you have some kind of impact like that, some kind of kinetic impact that's driven from a cyber event. That could drive some change. Although, of course, you have to get Congress to actually agree on something, which, I'm not going to place any bets that they can pass any kind of legislation that's not along, can we come together for something nonpartisan that's good for the country? I'm skeptical.
So you mentioned that too. And I actually, the other day, because this is the type of nerd I am, I was looking at some stuff about how long it actually takes to typically pass a bill through the House, Senate, Congress, and all that stuff from start to finish. And this is kind of interesting when you go over it, right? So let's see, let me make sure this is correct. So last session of Congress, there was 5,884 bills were introduced in the House and 3,020 in the Senate. 857 got hearings. 377 were in the Senate hearings, which means 86% of those bills died before they ever got anywhere. By the end, 296 were actively made into laws. And then that means basically 96.7% of all legislation introduced is dead on the vine. And here's the other part that's kind of cool, is if you crawl through the numbers, on average, from a bill being introduced to it going into something where there's a stroke of a pen, the timeline is minimum of 270 days. So how fast does technology change? How fast does cyber stuff change? Do we think we're going to get anything that's done meaningful in less than 270 days, especially when we have a flat divided, House, Senate, Congress, all that stuff?
Yeah, it's not really encouraging, is it?
No, I mean, it doesn't make me go, oh, cool, we have a way to legislatively fix this issue. I don't know. I'm just, Christopher Wray, I think, was on CNN or whatever this morning, and he used the term, like you said, he's talked about a cyber 9/11. And unfortunately, until there's, bodies dropping, I don't think it's going to be taken serious enough.
Especially if you look at like the lobbying going on, and, you imagine if there was a, the SOX version, the bigger SOX kind of thing, the lobbying that would go against that to all the senators and various representatives to not do that because increased costs and things along those lines. It definitely, I'm not real optimistic about it.
No, I mean, the other thing that they talked about on the news, which I don't know why I do this to myself. I sit here like a 90-year-old man screaming at the TV all morning, but it's like they're talking about more requirements, more compliance, whatever else. And I mean, my thing, and I think you kind of agree with me, is like there's already a lot of it out there, and we've got a lot of really compliant organizations that have had their lunch eaten. Like, this is not about another line item mandate that's going to fix this thing. It's just not gonna. It doesn't necessarily work the way that they think that it does.
No, I think
I don't know about you, but I've never heard of a bad guy or an adversary in an underground forum being like, "Oh my God, they're PCI compliant."
My gosh, they have SOC 2, hard target. Shut
it down all day. Let's leave. They just go, oh well, you know what? We'll just start fishing. I mean,
hard target. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's that meme or whatever where the guy's got the bulletproof vest on, the dude shoots him in the head, like, okay. Compliant.
Well, I can't remember which Verizon DBIR it was. It was one of the early ones, like first 6 years. There was a line in there. I don't know who wrote it, maybe Wade, but it was like something along the lines like, why use a cruise missile when the screen door is wide open? I mean, and this was, over 10 years ago. And this is what a lot of the extortionists are doing. They're just coming in the screen door because they don't have multi-factor authentication on these external facing services. We're not patching Citrix vulnerabilities. But I do think it does speak to, like, on the ransomware side, this, like, the challenges that we have with asset management and understanding, our attack, as Kindervall calls it our protect surface, which, turns it on its head, and it's less that you're trying to defend, but not understanding what that stuff looks like in the public facing stuff. And you're just opening yourself up. I mean, I get it's hard to do for some organizations. You're huge. You've done a lot of M&A and that sort of stuff. But, if there's one thing to focus on, it's what are the things that are being exploited and what are your external facing services?
Well, and that's where it concerns me, is that the Fortune 2000 have got, I mean, honestly, they've got infinite money and they've got infinite resource. They just, continue to, scream into the void until they get what they want. Whereas when you look at small and mid-size, which is where a lot of these, like, who would have ever said 2 weeks ago that some fairy company in Martha's Vineyard is going to get ripped? I mean, who's going to say that a meat packing organization is going to get hit? Like, I think that what we see here is a lot of the adversaries, like you're talking about, that are looking for the slow gazelle on the Serengeti. They're going to the easy targets, but those easy targets are connected into the Fortune 2000. So it just continues to propagate the cycle of failure.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you go a little bit, it's not that old school, but Dark Overlord was a very prominent crew, and Dark Overlord did a lot of their targeting on healthcare, like small healthcare, ransomware types of stuff. I was doing a talk was maybe in May, late May in Colorado for one of the chambers of commerce in I think Denver, and it was a lot of small and medium business, and we talked a lot about extortion there because there's a big pain point, and they don't have all the resources that large companies do. So it's challenging from many angles on that side of the house.
Okay, so I have to ask the question because I say it all the time, and I know I'm not the only person that rants and raves about this. Cyber insurance. What's your thought?
It's very complex. If you think insurance is, you can use insurance to just right away, the implications of an intrusion or a loss of data, you're going into it wrong. There's all kinds of different types of insurance that you can get. Stuff that's more focused on paying out incident response. Like I think this is a good use case for insurance is let me pay out my incident response, set up my call center, so that I can have my free credit monitoring call in, whatever purpose. I don't even know why people do that anymore since everyone's probably got free credit monitoring for life based on all the time you're dead. Whatever. So I think insurance in general can be a useful tool to help compensate for some loss. But if the keys to your kingdom are stolen, or like you have this big loss of availability because of a ransomware event, you're going in wrong. So if you have this idealistic perspective on what insurance is going to do for you, you're not going to have the outcome that you're looking for. Plus, the insurance companies also do look for ways, or opportunities to not pay on policies as well. So that comes into the mix. My suggestion would be on insurance is, you're going to probably want to go with a specialist, because you can get in a regular policy, you can get like a little bit of a rider and get a certain level of that. But like if you're in the finance and maybe it's anti-fraud and you want to get something for, fraud insurance, there's specific riders for that. So I'd work with somebody that specializes in it and multiple to get their understanding of it, because it's quite complex, because what you think you're going to get may not be what you get.
Yeah. The problem I have with it, honestly, number one, is that I think most insurance, typically kind of sucks, because where else can you pay for stuff and pay for it? And then when you need it, they go, oh, well, you got to pay a deductible on top of that, and we're going to try and give you the depreciated value, whatever. Anyway, that's just Chase's problem with insurance companies. But the other side of it is, in the cyber world, a lot of these people go, well, we have cyber insurance. And I'm workshops with them, and I say, well, did you learn to drive a car before you had insurance, or did you just bought insurance and start driving? What sense does that make? It's not, you can't do that and expect to have a good outcome.
That's a good analogy.
It's the same thing, right? Did you just hop in a car and go, well, I got insurance, and, drove down the road, or did you learn how to drive and then eventually you got insurance, and, it's sort of supposed to be that way.
I'd say insurance is just one tool that you have to try to mitigate risk, or in the insurance case, like recover from damages.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a risk reduction and a keeping you back in business thing, but I don't think it's a control or a safeguard or any of that stuff, personally.
Yeah, well, going back to our joke about you got SOC 2, no one's gonna be like, oh, they have an insurance policy, we're not going to target them. No, it's like, no, we are going to target you because we know you have an insurance policy and we can get paid out through the insurance company, which we do see the extortionists doing as well.
Yeah. Did you see there was a chat session with Guccifer, and Guccifer said, they asked him flat out, like, what's his thoughts on insurance companies? And he, in the chat, he texted back, he was like, LMFAO. He's like, I love it when they have insurance. He's like, cause I get them, I know they're going to pay. And then I go after the insurance provider too.
That's like a qualified target.
Yeah.
Right. If you're trying to qualify your targets, like, oh yeah, there's a more like, cause people do say they're say and spray. And I think that is the case, but they do care about how much effort it goes into a target. And, they do want to minimize their cost of operations. And the juice better be worth the squeeze on some of these organizations as well. And we do see the actors targeting certain call it a collection bias for us, but one of the main segments, industrial goods and services, is one of the top ones that are targeted. So you do see specific targeting. You might not call it like a targeted attack in the sense that we would say like, oh, it's APT, 33 that's doing an attack because they're pissed off about something with, US-Iran relations or something along those lines. But there is a method to the madness for the extortionists.
Yeah, the only really good thing to come out of this whole thing, I think, is this is finally seeming to wake people up to the fact that that argument of like, well, I don't know, a ferry company. Why would a nation state organization care about me? It's like, it's not even necessarily about that. They're not a nation state. You're right. They probably don't care about you, but they're using you to get to other things. Like, this is a way of, influence and, economic impact and blah, blah, blah. But it's not that you're not a target worth targeting.
Well, to go back to the DBIR analogy, I can't remember again what year it was, but the first year that they did the vertical breakout, they did the mapping of verticals and breaches, and it was a piece that like CISOs and security leaders could use to try to, hey, look, our segment, we may be small, but we're still getting targeted from an espionage perspective. I think the letter, you talk about, I kind of made some jokes about the letter and stuff like that, but the way I would use the letter as a tool right now, like I'm in once July hits, I'm going to start my 2022 planning in earnest, right? If I have this letter, you have all the headlines. Certainly your C-suite knows what's going on with Colonial and can't get their brisket and all that sort of stuff. Which, by the way, like, don't mess with the brisket, right?
There are lines you don't cross.
That's the real thin red line is the brisket. But this letter could be something you could put into your planning for 2022. And let's say there's something that you want to it's got segment your network. So maybe you're budgeting next year for some zero trust stuff. Here's an example. Throw in your Forrester report, throw in your Gartner report, whatever. Throw this in there as just, again, because y'all know how it is, right? You can want to do something internally and it's the right thing that you want to do. And you've been saying it and screaming it from the top of the mountain for 2 years, but then you have a third party say it and it gives more credibility.
Yeah, we should totally do that. Yeah,
that's a great idea. Why didn't you do that?
Why didn't you do that? Yeah, you suck at your job.
I think this letter could be a tool that you could use to help kind of support your efforts. It's not going to close a deal with your CFO, but it's another component that you can use to try to advance your program. And maybe it gets you one more thing that you weren't going to get.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the other thing that I wish a lot of folks would kind of do in this. You ran into this too, right? Where people, they keep doing more, and it's like, have you actually stepped back and kind of gone and said, well, what do I really need to have, and can I start there, and then can I progress more intelligently forward? It's not just about more all the time. And okay, so actually, funny, I just got a link from somebody that said, what about the government offering tax incentives for cybersecurity stuff? I mean, that's an interesting idea.
It might help me buy my Ford Lightning next year. It's going to cut the sales price off of that. So yeah, I think that's a good option.
I think that's a good idea, but I would be wondering how would they enforce that, equally across everything, because there's so many variables in this whole deal. Like, it would be, it's hard enough to make insurance applicable, much less the freaking tax code. My God, can you imagine if the IRS got involved in cyber taxes?
Can you imagine the vendors that are like, can you imagine RSA like a month after it was announced that there was all these cybersecurity tax?
Oh my God!
To buy certain products, I think we'd all just lose it.
Yeah, that would be one of those deals where you would probably see people stroke out on the floor just from the whole thing. It's a good idea. I don't know how we would get the government to not dork it up, to be perfectly frank.
But maybe it's better than a mandate across the board. Like, everyone must, you shall do this. It could be an opt-in thing, right? Because you're opting in to make these purchases and then you get a discount on it.
I mean, that could work, right? Where if you're doing stuff and you can prove that you're whatever, then okay, we'll offer you a tax credit or something. Actually, okay, I could see that making some sense. Again, scares me that there's like 3 things in this life that I'm terrified of. Spiders, terrified of spiders. I'll burn the house down to get rid of one. I don't like, I'm terrified of when my daughters start dating, because I think that's going to end with me going to prison. And then number 3 is the IRS. Like, those 3 things scare the hell out of me.
In that order? I mean, spiders above your daughters?
My daughters haven't started dating yet, so talk to me in a year, and then it's probably
your threat model is going to change a little bit. Your threat model should evolve.
Yeah, it's an evolving threat model. Yeah, but right now, spiders is number 1. I mean, I just did my taxes, so I'm good with the IRS. I think I don't see any black SUVs outside. So
we're lucky. We still have in Texas, because of our wonderful ice storm that took out the power grid. I think we have till June 15th. We got an extension on our taxes, so we haven't done it just yet here.
Well, I did mine, and then I realized, I was like, well, are they going to take more of my debt? I mean, that would be okay. I think we covered a swath. What else have we missed in this thing? I mean, I'm waiting, like it's 1:40 on Friday. I mean, usually the weekend is when things really hit the fan. So I'm kind of sitting around going, counting ammo, seeing how deep my bunker goes in the backyard. Like Saturday, Sunday could be crazy.
Well, we got Nebellum last Friday evening. So I wonder what we might get today. I did have one. There was one thing, I think, because we're talking about like long tails of this. The one thing that you can do right now that doesn't cost you any money, it doesn't cost you time, is incident response plan, like tabletop exercise. The Kindervog had a report at Forrester, which I continued when I joined. Planning for failure. Like right now, if you have not done a tabletop exercise on extortion, go do it next week. And the way that we've done it, because we do private reporting for customers, and then we do public comments on extortionists. So like an extortionist and talk about threat models, really high for me. So our last tabletop exercise was an extortionist coming after Digital Shadows. We did it two ways. We had the C-suite version, and then at the same time, we had the IT and security, more hands-on, actually doing a little bit of purple team exercise at the same time. So we had 3-day window, and we did 2 days tech, and then 1 day exec. And we had like the CEO, our CEO, Al, was in the mix there. We had marketing, we had PR representation. Having
biscuit, sorry, I just saw that.
Oh, you saw it? Yeah, I thought I would change it to that.
Nice.
But get these other stakeholders on, and then critically, talk to your, you maybe don't have to be in the table talk, but talk to your insurance provider, talk to your regulator, find out what would happen if you did X. If we pay, what would be the implications of that? If we didn't, I've talked to clients both at Forrester and at Digital Shadows that have paid but didn't coordinate through an insurance provider before they did it, and then invalidated their policy. So you can do this with little effort for your team, just time. The other reason I think it's important is we're about to start budget planning. Do your tabletop exercises now, and then use that to help. Okay, I can't do all of the things here, but I can do 2 of them, and these are the 2 that I need to do based on the results of our tabletop exercise. And then maybe you're doing like the initial access component for extortionists as well, and you get a little technical controls in it too.
I mean, okay, so you said it, and I want to ask the question because it's something that's come up really often. Is I don't know how I really think necessarily about the whole pay and the ransom thing. Like I get both sides of that conversation, and then I also put myself in the place of, if I'm running a pipeline that supplies oil and gas to the entire East Coast, and somebody's asking me for $5 million, I stroke that check twice a day. Because it's like, look, I need the system back up and running. $5 million to me is a rounding error, like problem solved. And yeah, you don't necessarily get the immediate turn back on, whatever else. But I don't know. I mean, if and I've advised clients on both sides of this equation after something like this has occurred, I just can't say unequivocally, thou should not pay a ransom. I don't know.
No, I'm in the camp of two thoughts on it. One, I'm similar to you. Like I'm in the camp of it's an individual business risk decision. Can you imagine the pressure Colonial Pipeline was getting from the government to get operations back up? So I think each company needs to decide that. But I also think the paying the ransomware is like the wrong conversation. We're talking about treating the symptoms and not the disease. And if you go back to not having multi-factor, the basics, which are not easy, like let's focus our effort on not even letting the ransomware actors get the low-hanging fruit to get the initial access into the environment. The FBI had kind of evolved their statements over the years. For the longest time, it was don't pay. And then in the IC3 report, which is an annual report, the Internet Crimes, I forgot what it's.
Internet Crimes Communication Center or something like that.
Yeah, you can go and have an incident and then you publicly repeat it. They had softened their language on payment a little bit, and then this year happened, and now that language has kind of changed back there. But law enforcement's really hot right now for even before Colonial law enforcement was moving the extortion actors up to the top of their target lists.
Well, I mean, Fujitsu got ransomed, Scripps got ransomed, and they haven't said anything yet about whether they paid or not. My guess is probably so, because again, it goes back, like you said, it's one of those business decisions of I'm going to lose $10 million a day in revenue, or I pay $5 million and I'm back up and running.
Yeah.
Okay. No problem. Stroke, call it a day. And that also brings us back to that whole point of prosecuting and finding these folks. They're using cryptocurrency. Your odds of catching them and having the proof to actually say this was them that did this thing, pretty damn slim. I mean,
especially if they keep it in Bitcoin, because they'll take the Bitcoin most ubiquitous, but then they start using mixing and tumbling. It's kind of washing your money if you're an Ozark fan, right? It's the digital version of Jason Bateman there. And then they'll do currency swaps into other currencies that have, more privacy than, the blockchain on the Bitcoin. I think I think the cryptocurrency stuff is tough, because even if you try to do stuff within the United States, you can't take a tumbling service that runs out of Russia out. Right. So I think some of the cryptocurrency stuff may not have the impact. We'll have to see what kind of directives come out on that. But it may not have the impact that people are hoping for.
Yeah, I was watching the news this morning, and there was some big Bitcoin conference going on somewhere in the United States. And I was like, it's like the Fed should just be there and arrest every third person. Eventually you'll get a ransomware operator. Like, I mean, that's, that's one way to start whittling it down. Like, you're under arrest for what? I don't know, Bitcoin something or another. Like, you come with us.
For your beard, because you flew in for the Bitcoin / World Beard and Mustache competition.
Like, of all the dumb things to get picked up on, that one's definitely way up in the list. Like, I'm trying to think of what would possibly be worse, but that's pretty high,
There's another one that just happened recently, and I can't remember the details because this week has been a rough week, but there was a dude who put a picture of some soap, and basically law enforcement able to use the soap as the breadcrumb to catch that one. So yeah, it
was his fingerprints, right? They got his fingerprints off of the soap picture or something like that, wasn't it? Which is kind of scary to be like, well, you can we're falling into what's that movie, Minority Report thing.
Well, maybe that's what we need. Maybe Tom Cruise is our solution to the ransomware.
We have to check all their thetan levels when we arrest them. Be like, hey, what's your thetan level? That's how we know if they're good or bad. Couldn't resist. Yeah, man. I don't know. Like, this whole thing continues to get increasingly interesting. I don't know about you, but I'm just sitting here going, I think this is gonna maybe be the wake up. Like, maybe.
It's like we have such a long history of hitting snooze on these wake up calls, though.
Yeah.
I mean, because we had, Target, Sony, all the healthcare insurance providers. Admittedly, like, when it's Colonial or it's meat, that's a little bit different. But I don't know. Maybe it's like the jaded former analyst in me. I'm just skeptical of how well we respond to.
I'm with you. I think until bodies drop, unfortunately, I hate to be the person that says that. Until bodies drop, mass casualty type event, it's just going to be one of those like, okay, we should fix this type things.
Sadly.
It sucks. I mean, nobody took, airline security serious until bad things happen.
And then you might end up with the security theater version of responding to ransomware as well. Like, obviously, we've done some good things with airline security, but there's a lot of security theater. I haven't seen it because I haven't been on a plane in 15 months.
Oh my God. Can you imagine if they put the TSA in charge of cyber? Like, when you go to log on, there's somebody that's going to wand you, and then you have to have your fingers. I don't even want to think about it. Yeah, like, can I get a TSA pre-check for login, please?
I think we solved the problem here, Chase.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do. So anyway, Friday the 4th at 1:50 p.m. One of the smartest guys in the industry, Rick Holland. Thanks for jumping on my first live stream with me, man.
That was cool. Well, thanks for letting me hijack it because I don't think I was the intended guest. So thanks for having me join.
Perfect. Dr. Brisky. Have a great weekend. Thanks for coming.
All right. You too, man.
Bye.